Good morning, ladies and gents. You find Mr. Businessman struggling with hay fever again. It's just one of those days, isn't it? It feels like there's a lot of pollen in the air today. So unfortunately, yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more yes, hello, today than usual. But I'll take some antihistamine in a bit. I've just not done it yet. So yeah, we're gonna do something a little bit different today because we're doing our price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand, but it's not a particularly long drawn out affair. This one, it's not a particularly long drawn out PowerPoint. It's not a thing. So what I've done is I've got a second thing that we're gonna have a look through in detail, a past paper question as well, which I hope is pretty useful for you. I think it will be. And then I know as well in terms of the spec and things that we've done, we're making really good time. We're doing really well with the sort of the revision sort of lessons on everything. But there is a couple of like only like one or two topics that I haven't put in yet. Don't worry about them. I will cover them all. It's just I've just been cherry picking really what ones I wanted to do at the time because some of them are a little bit more difficult to do on this than others. So that's why I've done it like that. But yeah, so no, not much else to tell you. No else has happened, has it? But it's Tuesday today, so keep telling yourself that it is Tuesday. As I said to those of you in the future, it might not be Tuesday. It might be any day. So, but welcome to Tuesday and welcome to this crazy world we are in. All right, we're gonna get straight. Oh, and as well, I don't know if you saw yesterday's stream, but there was a bit where it went off. The audio went off. I figured out why. It was when I was typing in the numbers. I have hotkeys on here. I must have tapped a hotkey. That was what it is, and it muted the audio. So it wasn't a software issue. It was my issue, my problem. So I apologise emphatically to you all for that. But anyway, so I'll avoid doing that today. You see, that's what happens if you try and be good in it. That's what happens if you try and help people. You end up messing up your hotkeys. Anyway, I've seen as well that we are having a few issues with drop frames and stuff today. We'll keep an eye on it. Okay, if it's a massive issue, it just seems to be one of those days that suddenly, I know it's. We're doing it more and more. We'll see if it keeps happening because I can see myself on the on the thing from YouTube. If it keeps happening, I'll I don't know, reset the stream or something. I just don't. It really annoys me that if it keeps doing it. We'll keep an eye on it. I don't know why. Some days it must be the amount of people who are using the internet at the same time, but it seems okay. We're all right. Yeah, all right. Anyway, let's get straight on and do some price elasticity of demand, shall we? So, this is an important topic that I personally didn't sort of spend enough time on when I was a student. I didn't really know anything about it. I'd heard about it, but I didn't really understand the importance of it or how it really affects business. And since I learned more about it, it's not an enjoyable thing. I don't think any business theory is enjoyable, but it's not a boring bit of the spec, and it's something which is very usable. So it's something which you can actually use in real life, these different concepts, which I like. I like real world application rather than just random theory. So let's have a look. Anyway, it says understand the concept of price and income elasticity of demand, and explain the nature of inferior, normal, and luxury goods. Okay, we've talked about these over the last couple of days. Remember, there is more to do, but these are more revision, aren't they? So let's have a look. So just to begin with, and you can answer these in your own mind. You can answer them. Feel free to write them down or anything if you want. But it says what items do you buy on a regular basis? How much do you usually pay for them? What would you cost if you increased the price by 50%? Would you still buy it at this new price? If so, yes. If so, no. Why not? Would you buy something else instead? Now, it's important this, isn't it? Because I definitely buy things regularly. There are definitely things which I am funny about in terms of price, and there are things which I will pay up to a certain amount for, and then I won't pay any more for. So, for example, like Pringles is a good example for me. You'd never know I really love Pringles, but I really do. They're like crack to me. They're amazing. Not that I've ever tried crack. Just want to get that out of the thing or the thing. But I was watching a program the other day about someone having crack. And he was talking about how it ruins lives and things like that. So don't try crack. Don't trade drugs. Mr. Businessman says don't trade drugs. Yeah, it's something which I really like. I don't buy lots of things like that, but I like I like Pringles and Doritos and stuff like that. And I definitely have seen a massive price increase. I remember when Pringles used to be like £1, and they are £1 sometimes in shops, but the price has steadily increased, and there will be a point, and there has to be a point at which you won't buy it. Like if I go into Spar's a bad example. Is a good example of a company which is doing bad things with Pringles, because you go into Spar, they're like £3.50. It's insane. £3.50 for some Pringles is absolutely insane. It's not reasonable, and I'm not paying £3.50 for a tube of Pringles. So there is definitely a point where I won't buy them, but it's not that I won't buy them. I'll go to a different shop to buy them for a cheaper price. So as long as they're available for a cheaper price, then I'm still able to satisfy my addiction, aren't I? But if there wasn't, and it was more expensive everywhere, then I'd have to make a decision of whether I really wanted them. I very, very much doubt, though, I'm not spending £3.50 on a tube of Pringles. The only time I'd be spending £3.50 on a tube of Pringles would be in a situation like a hotel or an airport or something like that, somewhere where I physically couldn't have access to it. And we're going to talk about that, access to substitute products and things like that, and its effect on your willingness to pay for things. So I buy Pringles. How much do you usually pay for it? Probably about £1. What would it cost if you increased the price by 50%? £1.50, but would you still buy it? I think I would still buy it. It annoys me because I've kind of anchored my brain to it being £1. So if it was £1.50, it still annoys me. But £1.50 is not the end of the world. It's significantly more, but I probably would still buy it. But if it gets more than that, then it's getting to the point where I won't buy it anymore. I think video games are a good example of these as well. I know that we've got a lot of gamers who like to watch this, and games are a fantastic example, because people say you look at a video game right now, they're $39.99. They used to be, I remember games being $39.99, and now they've sort of different editions of them, $59.99 and stuff like that, or $49.99. And people talk about the fact that games are more expensive now than they've ever been, which isn't true, because if you look at inflation and you look at the time value of money, games have been very consistent, and considering the massive increase in cost of sales, a massive increase of fixed and variable costs that the manufacturers and the developers have to go through. We're not talking about making Mario for a little sprite that runs across the screen or anything like that. We're talking about full AAA multi-million pound projects that they're absolutely huge. So it's not as simple as just saying, okay, well, it's not that skilled, we'll just get a few people to do it, blah, blah, blah. The cost to these places have gone absolutely astronomical. And if you'd have bought a video game in like the 80s, it would have been the equivalent of about 100 quid, 150 quid, something like that, in today's money. So it's not only are we getting the best quality that we've ever had, and I don't mean in terms of, there's arguments for old games being better and things like that in terms of story and things like that, but in terms of, visual fidelity and in terms of, scope of the game, we're getting a significantly better product than we've ever had at a really, really reasonable price, considering the amount of cost that goes into it when producing it. But it's an interesting one, isn't it? Would you still buy it? I don't know. But we've got the new Xbox and that coming up soon, haven't we? And whether people will actually buy it will be dependent on cost. The reason that the Xbox 360 did so well and the PlayStation 3 didn't, after the PlayStation was so dominant at the PlayStation 2 era, was to do with price and to do with the fact that when it came out, it was like 500 quid and people weren't willing to pay it. I wasn't willing to pay it at the time. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? You'll have your own decisions, you'll have your own products that you like, and you've got to ask yourself, even if it's a brand that I really like, would I be willing to pay a premium for it? I don't know. It's up to you at that point, isn't it? So what is price elasticity of demand? Right. Well, price elasticity of demand is price elasticity measures the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. So what does that actually mean? Well, basically, it means how much does demand change if you change the price. Okay, and we do it in percentages because it's easier. So basically, if I was to change the price by 1%, how much would the I mean, we don't have to do 1%, but I'll explain in a second. But if I was to change it by 1%, would the demand change by more than 1% or less than 1%? Is the basic question. And you can increase it by more, you can increase it by 50%, blah, blah, blah. But it's the comparative responsiveness is what we're interested in. So it's in comparison to other things. It's in comparison to, each other. If we increase one side, things like that. Okay, so why is it important for a business to know this? Well, it helps make pricing decisions. Being able to judge the likely impact of a change on price would have on demand and therefore revenue. And it's really important to understand this, that the fact you can't just put your price up to whatever you want, or if you put your price down, or if you're doing a special offer, or if you're doing 2-for-1s and things like that, they've all got to be thought through, these pricing decisions, before we do them. And price elasticity is a really helpful thing to do that with. So goods can be either what we call price elastic or price inelastic. The only thing that really means is price elastic is proportionally more, in terms of it's more than, if you change price by 1%, then it would be more than 1% change. And inelastic is proportionally less. So you change it by 1%, it's less than 1%. All right. So price elastic goods, a good where a change in price will cause more than a proportional change in the quantity demanded. Does that make sense? If a price goes up, demand falls dramatically. Now, let's just stop a second and talk about this, because we've not covered supply and demand yet on the stream. And as I said, it's one of the ones I've been leaving alone just because it's not the easiest thing to do just on a PowerPoint. But I'm looking at it at the minute, and I will cover it in the next couple of lessons. And basically, there's a law that if you increase the price, then demand will go down. Okay, and why is that? Well, what it is, it's to do with demand. All right, and demand isn't just people wanting it, because a lot of people think that. Like, for example, that's why demand for Ferrari isn't infinite. Because everybody wants a Ferrari, don't they? It'd be brilliant if you could get one. If they said, "Do you want a Ferrari?" you wouldn't say no, would you? Oh, fantastic! It'd be brilliant to have a Ferrari, yeah. But that doesn't mean there's a demand for 2 million Ferraris, because it's all to do with the willingness and ableness. So whether you're willing to purchase it and your ability to purchase it, whether you've got the purchase price of it to buy that product. Because even if I was to say to you now, okay, how much is a Ferrari? Let's say it's £100,000, all right, £150,000. Let's say £100,000. If I was to give you £100,000 today, then that doesn't mean that you would still be willing to go and buy a Ferrari either. You might go, well, actually, yeah, I would do lots of things with £100,000, but it wouldn't be a Ferrari. I'd buy a house, or I'd buy this, or I'd go on holiday, or whatever it was. So it's really important to understand that if that's our demand, if it's all to do with people's willingness and ableness, and as long as it's those two things together, you've got the money and you're willing to do it, then it makes demand, or it qualifies for demand. Then basically what we're saying is, if the price goes up, then there will always be, it's a fact, isn't it? It's a scientific fact that there will be less people who are willing and able, even if it's purely the ability to. There will always be less people who have more money than there would be if it had been cheaper. Okay, so for an example, if I was to get a loaf of bread and it was £1, there would be a lot of people who could afford and are willing to purchase that bread. If I was to put it up to £1.50, there would be a lot of people who could purchase it, but there would be less people who could purchase it than the £1 one. All right, it doesn't really make as much when that with such small increases, but there would be, because what would people do? Would they probably just go to an alternative or something like that, wouldn't they? So it's an interesting one. It's an important one, price elasticity, though, because to understand that fact that if you put the price up, then demand will always fall. There's a negative correlation between the two variables. It's just a fact. There isn't anything that if you put the price up, more people would be willing and able to do it. It's not doesn't happen. What product would that be? More people are able to than if you had less money. Well, how does that work then? So do you see what I mean? You've got to understand that concept, the relationship between you know, supply and demand, essentially, that the rule of supply and demand, that if you put the price up, then demand will always fall. So if a price goes down, demand rises dramatically. In this regards, it says if price goes up, demand falls dramatically. And when we say dramatically, it just means proportionally more. It doesn't mean like it goes crazy. It doesn't have to be 50% or something like that. It just means if you change it by 1%, then there would be more than 1%. Change in the price. If the price goes down, if we take the price down, then demand rises dramatically. And in terms of that, again, it doesn't have to be shoot up by 50%. It could just be anything more than the 1%, anything more than the change that you did. You change the price by 0.01% and it changes by 0.02%, then it's still elastic, isn't it? Not very elastic, but still elastic. So it says, i.e. the level of demand is sensitive to a change in price. This can be impacted by how many substitute goods there are. If there is a large number of similar goods or substitute goods in a monopolistic or perfect competition, then people will switch and buy similar goods for a cheaper price. If you remember, we talked about monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is where there is a lot of different brands all doing very similar products, but are differentiating themselves with brands, because that's the only way they can really do it. So your price elasticity, your ability to sell a product at a decent price, and your ability to be able to change the price whenever you feel like it, is dramatically impacted by the number of substitute goods on it, the pricing structure that the industry is using, essentially. Because if you've got a product which is you've got a patent on and no one else can do it, or you've got a brand which you have a trademark on or something like that, then whilst there are other goods that might satisfy people, they're not going to be the same. So let's think about Apple. I know we talk about them a lot, but let's think about the MacBook, right? The MacBook is a good example of a product which is a strange one, because whilst it will be, it's a luxury item, and we'll talk about luxuries in a second, and you would expect it to be quite elastic, which it is. It is. There is an element that brings it right down. It makes it a lot more inelastic and a lot less sensitive to change due to the brand that it's got. Because it's not like you can go and buy another MacBook. They've done something really clever by having its own operating system, by having its own uniqueness and the design and everything. Yes, you can go and buy another laptop, and it is, I think you could say it's monopolistic competition, really, because there isn't, there's loads of other brands, Acer, Asus, Microsoft, all these different brands that are doing it. Simultaneously, there's no one else doing this, because this is a unique product, which is by Apple, and you get a unique experience by buying this. So it's an interesting one of whether the elasticity for this product, would MacBooks be sensitive to a change in price? Probably less sensitive than you'd expect. Probably less sensitive, because people are still willing to go out and buy them at an exorbitant price. As I said, I paid £800 for mine, which I think is a lot of money, but it's probably reasonable for the spec that I got. Whereas I know people are going into the shop, go in today and pay £1,300-1,400 for a very, very basically spec'd laptop. But it's Apple, isn't it? So the brand makes it less elastic. So let's have a look at things. So it says, what factors make a product elastic? Well, one of the big things that makes it elastic is the number of alternatives. So let's not think about inelastic for the minute. Let's just think about elastic things. If you've got lots and lots of products out there, let's talk about bread. Bread's a good one, isn't it? Bread will be elastic. It has to be, because although it's a necessity good in terms of it's something that we need, it's something that we will buy at any price to an extent. Because it's a necessity good. It's something that it's a basic good, isn't it? It is quite elastic because there is so many alternatives. If you don't get Hovis, you could have Warburtons. If you don't get Warburtons, you can get supermarket bread. If you don't get that, you can go to a bakery. There's loads of different ones. So whilst it will be inelastic to the extent that people will still buy it at a different thing, and it's not going to have a massive impact on it. It will be, the elasticity will increase due to the number of alternatives available. And if you don't have bread, you can have a pita bread, and if you don't have that, you could have a wrap. If you don't have that, you could have crackers. Whatever it is, there's a range of alternatives available to you, isn't there? So that will significantly, impact on the elasticity of it. It's important to understand the fact that there are contributing factors to the elasticity of something, and then at the end of the day, we've got to decide whether it's price elastic or not based on fact, basically, based on numbers that we've got, based on empirical evidence that we've got about this. All we can do as business students is make reasonable assumptions about it, though. So what other factors might make it price elastic? What your competitors are doing in your market. So if they are massively undercutting you on price, if they are giving homogenous goods, if they can provide the same product as you but at a cheaper price, of course that's gonna make a difference to your product, isn't it? Of course that's gonna make it more elastic because if I can go to have the same product from you and the same product from your friend over there, then why bother paying a premium for yours? The big thing that businesses need to do is to make it more inelastic by increasing brand, increasing loyalty, increasing awareness, increasing all those different things. But we'll talk about those in a second. So the main thing that I'd say with product, what makes a product or what may make a product price elastic is the fact it's not a necessity good. The fact that it's something that you don't need, it's something that you might want but don't need. The price, something else that could make it more elastic is the economy to an extent, because you could have a price that you've set the product at, and that's quite reasonable. But because of the fact it's not a necessity good, when the economy messes up and people don't have enough money, then yours is one of the products that's going to become extremely elastic quite quickly, because people's willingness and ableness to purchase that good will diminish quite significantly. So it can have external factors can definitely impact on it. So you can also have things like competitors doing things, like having a more established brand image, things like that. There can be a wide range, can't there? So let's talk about inelastic stuff anyway. So goods where change in price will cause a less in promotional change in the quantity demanded. Demand is not as sensitive to change. So with this, it's basically, if I was to increase price by 1%, then there would be a less than 1% change. So it could be tiny, it could be really, really, really marginally inelastic in terms of this, but it could be it'll change by just under 1%. So it could be significant, like to this, but still not fall into that elastic sort of framework, if that makes sense. So what we categorize as elastic. So what it says, if a price goes up, demand falls just a little. Okay, not as much. The important thing to do is that, when we're using words like dramatically or little or things like that, the most important thing to do is keep telling yourself, getting the word proportional in your mind, because that's what we're talking about. It's the proportionality of the product's price and things like that. How much has the product changed in proportion to the change in price. Okay, so why is it most likely to happen? Well, the level of competition is low. We know, don't we, if we've got some kind of patent, if we've got some kind of brand, if we've got some things like that, then or maybe if we're just new to a market, if we're first movers, then there can be it can give us a large advantage, can't it? Because people can't just say, oh, well, if I don't want Hovis, I can have Warburtons. If I don't want that, I can have supermarket bread. There isn't alternatives. There's not really anything else you can buy. When there are a few substitutes as well, and when we say substitutes, we don't just mean the product. We mean, like I said, wraps, pita breads, crackers, whatever it is that people eat, leaves, something that you would eat instead, use instead of bread on a sandwich or something like that. You could buy a different product. So when we have substitutes, it doesn't have to be like for like. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing again. It's something that we could have which is similar to that product. When the goods are necessities. So when does it happen? When the goods are necessities, we talked about bread as an example, but bread, milk, cornflakes, toothpaste, sanitary towels, condoms, that kind of stuff. Things which you can't really go without. And I mean, you can go without these things, but I wouldn't suggest you do. But it's one of these things that it's important to understand the idea that there are products which are necessities that people can't really go without. Toilet roll is a good example. And look, I think that the fact that we were in this situation at the moment is a good example of the time when people are looking at necessity goods. Look at the state of, I don't know if anybody's tried to buy any weights recently or exercise equipment. It's supply and demand, obviously, because there's not much of a supply of it, because people can't get hold of these things, then the demand has gone way up and people have put the price up crazy amounts. People are selling bloody a weight bench without any weights for like 150 quid. It's only like a little stool. It's insane. But as soon as this all goes down, as soon as things are doing, then the price will come down to reasonable. But if we were to look at price elasticity in comparison to the situation at the minute, when the goods are necessities, people change their view of what necessity is depending on the situation. Look at what people did just before the lockdown. People went out and panic bought things like toilet roll because they're necessity items and they don't want to be caught without toilet roll, because it would be upsetting, wouldn't it, to be caught with toilet roll. Now, if you were to take yourself to a foreign market, they probably wouldn't see that. I think they would see toilet rolls as a necessity to an extent, but in foreign markets, then they tend to use things like bidets and they actually wash themselves after they've been to the toilet, which makes more sense when you think about it. It's probably a better technique to use. We should all be doing that, really, shouldn't it? Probably make you cleaner than just doing it. If you think about when you wash your car, you don't just spray it with a hose. Sorry, like you don't just wipe the dirt into it, do you? You usually spray it, use some stuff on it, and then wipe that stuff off. So there's an argument for it. I think I'm very pro bidet, Mr. Businessman, pro bidet. I think if you were to look at foreign markets in terms of price elasticity, the cultural differences and things like that would make a difference on the price elasticity and the way that people see the product as well. Okay, so perhaps when the goods are addictive, this is an important one as well. People always bring up in class alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think it's important to understand that. Yeah, price inelastic. People will pay any amount, if they're addicted to things, and you can see that, can't you? That people are still, even though we know that smoking gives you cancer, people are still purchasing the products, and even though that the government put masses of tax on it, people are still buying the products. Why are they buying the products? Because they're addicted to them. It's a chemical imbalance in the brain, isn't it, that causes that, and that's something that which it's difficult for these people to get over, and it isn't a joke. It's something that thingies. But as businesses, we can exploit that to an extent by still producing and thinking, well, we could put the price up. It's not going to affect people that much, When the brand loyalty is high, we talked about Apple is a brilliant example, isn't it? Are people willing to go out and drop £1,300, £1,400 on a laptop that's spec'd up to be a, £600, £700 laptop? Yes, if it's got a little thing on it. Although, I have to say, I still think that the build quality on Macs is fantastic. Other than the keyboard, I have to say the keyboard's still a bit rubbish because I've got one of the older ones in terms of I say older, 2019 ones, and it's still got the sort of the annoying keyboard on it and stuff like that, but in the grand scheme I think it's still a brilliant bit of kit, and the operating system's great, and I'm running it on this now. This is run on my MacBook, and it's just handles stuff well. It's a great bit of kit. It's been invaluable to me at this time to be able to do these kind of things and stuff like that. So I'd say I don't think I'm massively loyal to Apple, but I know a lot of people are. So if that is, the more inelastic they'll go, the more willingness we will to purchase that product. And when the price is small as well, if the price is small, then we don't really care. I've talked about Pringles before. Most of you might go, oh, well, I'll pay £3 for some Pringles, but I won't, because my brain is anchored to the old price. I think that's what you see with older people as well. Have you noticed that when they've got this obsession with things being really expensive now, and you think, well, no, that's quite reasonable, and it's because of inflation and things like that. Times change. If you go back 30 years, people wouldn't have been on half as much money that they are, but in real terms, the money would probably have been worth the same. So it's an important thing to remember of how times change and the psychology of the buyer, because that's what impacts this massively. A good way things, it says this means the businesses will have lots more control over the price they charge. How can a business make the product inelastic? We need to make the product. I'd say a really good way, a technology way that we can increase elasticity. Inelasticity and make it more inelastic is build yourself an ecosystem. Apple is a fantastic example of a product range that as an ecosystem. You buy the MacBook, you buy the iPhone, you buy the iPad, you buy the AirPods. They all work seamlessly together. And you get a message on your iPhone, it comes through to your Mac. If you get something on your Mac, it comes through to your iPhone. I think, and I have to say, it's the first time I've ever used the ecosystem, but it's definitely hooked me to a little extent. That when I've been doing my silly videos, you can see them on the YouTube channel where we are now. If you go to, I've got a playlist of like silly things, but also I put them up occasionally. What I tend to do is I tend to film them here, but what I do is I have the iPad next to me. I film them on the iPad using one of the apps on there, and then I literally airdrop it to my Mac. And I literally press a button, beep, and it's on my Mac. Fantastic. That's amazing. That's so good. And you can, if you can do that with the phones and things like that, which I imagine you kind of never had an iPhone of that, but the for someone who is creating content at the minute, like myself, I can definitely understand why. Even though I love my OnePlus and it's a fantastic bit of kit, I think there is definitely an argument for iPhone for content creators because of the ability to be able to move stuff over. And would that increase the inelasticity of the product? Of course it would, because it's something which is special. Can I just airdrop things from this because it's Android? No, I can't. And that's clever of Apple, because they've made it so that I'm getting something special, but also it anchors me to that brand, doesn't it? It makes it more inelastic. It means that the next time I might go, well, I could buy an iPhone, or thingies. Well, they've just put the price up. Yeah, but I get all these benefits from it, and I only know how to use iPhone, and blah blah blah. So the brand image is important, the ecosystem is important. Giving people good value, giving people good quality, customer service. The image of the brand is really important to you, and good marketing as well, because you want people to care about this product and think, well, actually, yeah, I do want to be seen with this product. I want to be, associated with this product. So there's quite a few things you can do with it, but it's a lot of it's to do with marketing and making sure that patents and things are fantastic as well to if you can get them. Remember, patents are to do with inventions. Trademarks are to do with like some kind of visual or word that describes your product or an image. And copyright is to do with artistic works. Just to differentiate those things for you. Okay. So as people get richer, they consume more. But let's have a little look at income elasticity demand. We've talked about price elasticity demand, but let's have a look at income elasticity demand. So the definition for this one is measures the responsiveness to a demand to a change in income. And this is instead of changing price, we change how much money that you get. So as people get richer, they consume more. This drives up demand for most goods and services. Does that bring you back to my willingness and ableness to do with demand? Yeah. If we are more able because we've got more money, then all we've got to be is more willing in terms of to buy things, and then we do. They say, don't they? I don't know if you've heard this, but it doesn't matter how much money that you earn, that you always live to your means. There is very few people who will not spend all their money. Like they might do a bit of savings and be sensible, but if you got a big pay increase, then the likelihood is that you just spend more money then every month. So you live to your means, and that's what this is about, isn't it? Income elasticity of demand. So it says here, so elastic is a change in income causes a more than proportional change in quantity demanded. So if you had more money, what would you buy more of? Okay, and this is something that you can fill in. I think you've got it in the books. You feel free to fill this in. But what would you buy more of if you had more money? Would it be food? For some people it would. Would it be luxuries? Would it be, really luxury stuff like technology and things like that? Would it be makeup? Would it be clothes? Would it be more branded stuff? Would you start shopping at different places? Would you start shopping at Aldi? Sorry, Aldi. Would you start shopping at Asda rather than Aldi? Would you start shopping at Sainsbury's or M&S rather than Lidl? So there's something to think of, isn't there? So what would you do if it's elastic? Then it's going to have a big impact. If your income changes by 1%, then you are going to buy more than 1% more of stuff than this. It's going to change a lot towards what you're buying. An inelastic is a change in income causes a less than proportional change in the quantity demanded. If you had less money, what would you still buy the same amount of? A lot of the time with the inelastic income stuff is what we're talking about, necessities, like we said, sanitary towels, toothpaste, toilet roll, things that you can't go without. And the basic goods like we said, bread, milk, cornflakes, those things. Even if you don't like cornflakes, the idea is that it's the basic food that you'd still need to have access to. Also, we have this thing which is interesting, which we've not mentioned before, but it's negative income elasticity of demand, and this is when a rise in incomes causes a fall in demand, which is a strange concept, isn't it? But basically, what we're saying is when your income goes up, then we have less demand for these things. So we're looking at your Aldi, your Lidl, your pound shop, your pound stretcher, your unbranded clothing and stuff like that. The main thing that we're looking at here is the cheapest stuff. If the that's the stuff that we will not buy more of, we will buy less of. So there is a negative correlation between as your income goes up, you will buy negatively. There will be a significantly negative drop on this. It's not just a bit. It's not we'll still buy them, but we'll buy less of them, like in elasticity. With this one, there is a negative correlation between the two things. We will actively shop at Lidl less if we have more money. Now, it's important to mention with this, when we get into the second year, when we get into degree level and we get into stuff like that, then we need to start thinking about these on a higher level, because it's not as simple as that. The psychology of consumers is not as simple as that, saying, oh, well, people will shop at Lidl less, because there is a Lidl or an Aldi in like Cambridge or something now where it doesn't make any sense, because the average wage there is extremely high, and yet people are still purchasing things from Lidl and Aldi. And I think that comes from the 2008 recession, and people have sort of got used to spending less and finding value from other things. Aldi and Lidl used to be a bit of a joke. It used to be something that people got upset about or were embarrassed about going to. Now it's seen as you were kind of a shrewd person by going there and kind of, they're good with the money, aren't they? So we have to think about that, that's kind of like a badge of honor by going around shops where they're thinking that they're sensible with money. So definitely the psychology of the consumer massively impacts on it, and that's what you will be looking at as you go on to go on further with business and look into it at a higher level. The more and more you start thinking about, well, it's not as simple as this is making out, because there is a lot of other. And if you want to mention some of that in your answers, fantastic. AO4, really powerful evaluation skills coming through. But just be careful not to go too far off the beaten track, because although it is true and that you don't want to get into a situation where you've lost the meaning of the question. Make sure you stick close to that question and what it's asking you. Okay. Now the final thing we're going to talk about really quickly, before we have a look at a past paper question, is the effect of income elasticity depends on the type of good. And we've got things here, haven't we? In terms of the value range, we've got gym memberships, we've got furniture and whether you need the furniture and things like that. So let's have a look at these. So they've got three different types. Now we've got normal goods. So as income levels rise, people buy more of this type of good. This is the majority of goods. So normal goods are just average goods, in terms of like they can be branded, just run of the mill, Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Aldi's cornflakes or whatever it is. They're just the run of the mill average products that are branded essentially. So as income levels rise, people buy more of them. Now it doesn't have to be massively more, and we would talk about the amount. Excuse me. the amount more that they buy would come down to the elasticity of the product, wouldn't it? The income elasticity, and you'd have to have a look at that separately. But with normal goods, they do go up. There is a positive correlation between the two. As one goes up, the other one goes up. Okay. So with this one, and then we have luxury goods. Luxury goods also can be classed as normal goods, but tend to be more sensitive to changes in income, like gym membership, like Apple products, like anything that's, like buying very, very expensive headsets for your Xbox or whatever, like games consoles and things like that. They are luxury goods. They're not something that, the things which you see in a lot of pawn shops and things like that. It's a good way of actually thinking about it is if you go down to the local pawn shop, pawn, not porn, pawn as in Pawn, as in you pawn things. If you go to your local pawn shop like Cash Converters or something like that and have a look what's in there, because there will be, the vast majority of them will be luxury items, watches, jewelry, TVs, consoles, things like that, because they are the first things to go when you lose money, when you don't have it. So it's a good example of think of what you would expect to see on those things, and you're good to go, aren't you? And inferior goods is the opposite of a luxury good. Inferior goods are the things which you have, are your lower brands, your sort of own brand things. So these are goods that have a negative income elasticity, which means demand rises when income falls. So if income goes down, then we've got the opposite effect of luxury goods, where when income goes up, the demand for these goes up. Well, inferior goods, when your income goes down, the demand for inferior goods goes up, and it's stuff like your Tesco value beans and things like that. Any sort of things, or your less brands, things like you wouldn't be going out and buying Apple. You might go out and buy a Chinese brand laptop or something like that, or a cheaper one, or whatever it is. You get the premise. Anything which is unbranded or a much lower own brand product is your inferior goods. And we don't say inferior. It's important to register this. We don't say inferior because it's bad quality. It's not. Tesco value baked beans will still have to go through all the health and safety that any other beans would, Heinz beans or otherwise, because they're produced here. But with this, and they're sold in a British market. But with the value range, the reason we call them inferior is that inferior is to do with brand and to do with they are seen as inferior to the original, if you will, product. So it's nothing to do with quality, although people see them as worse quality. That's more to do, again, with the consumer's mentality rather than the actual quality of the product. The quality would be up for argument. In fact, as a testament to that, there is I'll put a link to the video in the description of this, but there is a thing called Supermarket Wars or something like that, and they were talking about some people going and trying Aldi and Lidl produce, and they had a lady who was from Good Housekeeping. I think they're online now, but they used to be a magazine, and Good Housekeeping were basically looking at different types of cornetto, and they had Cornetto, the brand, but then they had Aldi's Cornetto, and they had all these different ones. So just an ice cream, but the type of Cornetto, and they found that the Cornetto was the smallest, and people actually preferred the inferior Aldi Cornetto. Which is crazy but that goes in the face of inferior, doesn't it? So don't always think it doesn't have to be about quality. You can have a fantastic product, it'd still be classed as inferior. Okay. So little summary for you, and if you have to remember anything that we talked about today, then these are the things which I want you to think about. We've got price increases. If we were inelastic, revenue increases in terms of elastic things like this. So if we're talking about what we called income elasticity, it's not price elasticity, it's just income elasticity. So if the price increases, then if it's inelastic, then our revenue will increase. Why will that be? Well, because if it's inelastic, that means that people will still buy pretty much the same amount or proportionally less of a change in demand. If it's elastic, then revenue will decrease, because if we put the price up, then that means a lot less people will buy it. Does that make sense? So if price decreases, we have the revenue will decrease, because if we decrease the price, and it's inelastic, that means that we decrease the price, but people will still There will be a proportional change, but it will be very, very marginal, and it's very likely that you will actually make less money from it. If it's elastic, then if we put the price down, then the likelihood is that much more people will buy it, and therefore revenue increases. We've got our luxury, normal, inferior. Really important that you remember these bottom ones, because people forget them all the time and they come up in exams and they screw people over. Luxury goods. If it's in recovery or recession, another thing to think about with these, isn't it? If we're in recovery, sales increase a lot. Why is that? Because people have more access to cash. The psychology of the consumer has changed to be able to be more confident about purchasing things. They're less worried, they're less holding on to the money. That's going to be the issue that we've got going forward, is not the fact that people are not going to have money, it's that people are going to be frightened of spending money. And this is what we find with the ideas of this. In a recession, sales decrease a lot of luxury goods. Why is it? Because people have a less of a willingness and ableness to purchase that good, so therefore there's a dramatic decrease in demand. For normal goods, just average goods, branded goods, in recovery, sales increase a little. The more than the increase probably more than they would have been, because they would have been buying inferior goods. But in this regard, they don't increase loads. And in recession, they decrease a little. There's not a massive change to inferior goods. It would depend on how bad that recession was and how little money people had. But if you look at this global pandemic that we're having now, with the current situation, if we changed it to recovery or pandemic, luxury goods will go down because people are worried. The average people are still worried about their things. Lots of people are on furlough on 80% wage, so they're not going to be thinking, oh, you know what, I'm going to go and buy? I'm going to go and buy a new MacBook because that'd be fantastic. Because you're thinking, well, yeah, but you've no money, so don't do that. That's not a very sensible thing to do. People are freaking out and buying lots of necessity goods, though, aren't they? They definitely are doing that, toilet rolls and things like that. And inferior goods in a recovery, sales decrease because people have more money to buy things, so they'll start shopping at Sainsbury's rather than Aldi again and things like that, buying similar things. And in a recession, sales increase. Okay, so obviously people look for cheaper alternatives and things like that. Now we're going to have a little look at a past paper question. All right, so let me just get this up for you. There we go. And let's just have a go through this. So it's not going to take us ages. We've got 10 minutes left of the session before we have a look at the news. And let's have a look at this one. So it says, this is the question. It says, consider using the concept of price elasticity demand, why rising price might be a poor decision. And then we've got 4 different things. We've got AO1, AO2, AO3, AO4. Let's break it down. So consider using the concept of price elasticity of demand, why rising price might be a poor decision. So we've got consider. Consider's an interesting one, isn't it? Consider is like evaluate almost, isn't it? It's like have an opinion on. So, or consider the ups and downs, consider the advantages and disadvantages, consider things. So using the concept of price elasticity of demand. So we've got the AO1. So we've got the AO4 in there, the consider. We've got the AO1 using the concept of price elasticity of demand. So if we have to understand that, we've got to explain what it is because they've raised it in the question. Why raising price might be a poor decision. Now in this one, interestingly enough, they've given you some AO2. And AO2, if you remember, is application to the case. That's a strange one. Now, in the exam, they'll probably give you a case study for something like this. But don't forget, we know that Welsh Word are sometimes up the wall with the way that they allot their AOs. And in complete honesty, the way they do it is that at the end of it, when they're allotting they have a certain amount of AO1, a certain amount of AO2, a certain amount of AO3, a certain amount of AO4 that they need to put in their exams. And sometimes they'll have a couple of marks left over at the end, and they'll just stick them in a question, which is insane. I mean, it's really difficult for students. It's particularly difficult for teachers and things like that. But that's what happens. And it's not just Welsh Board that do it. AQA do it and things like that. And it's not, I suppose it's the difficulty of doing it. I think it's difficult for us as to understand, this kind of stuff if they're doing things like that. But what can you do? So it's just a case of, remember, you're never going to get marks taken off you by applying it to a case or giving me an example or something like that. So always opt on the side of caution if you can. So let's have a look. So concept AO1, defining and showing the understanding of PED, inelastic or elastic demand. So explain to me, first of all, what the concept is. We've got the concept, content to consider. We've got the this. If they've given you a case study, if the case study is in your book, if they give you a case study in the exam, then fantastic. Then there's no need to worry too much. I think that in this case, I don't know whether there has been a case study. I haven't seen one to hand, but let's have a look. It says here. All right. Okay. Yeah. So if there was this one, this would be a good one. I'm not saying. Let me just double check. I didn't see. I didn't see there was one, so I'll just double check that there isn't one that I'm missing that I can't show you. When I got these out this morning, I didn't see one. So I'll just double check for you, just because if there is one, I'd rather show it you, if that makes sense. Here we are. Yeah, there is. Let me show you this first then. So, sorry about the messiness of this, but let me show you this. Come on, Word, you're being funny, aren't you? View. That doesn't help either. It's being fun, this, isn't it? Right. Oh, there we are. Okay. This is it. I know it's not beautiful, forgive me, but it's the best I can do. Okay, so let's have a little look at this question. If you've got it in your book, then fantastic. If you haven't, then here's the question. It says, Linos runs a coffee shop in Aberystwyth, is it? And business has been good in recent months. She's only decided to increase the price of her cups of coffee. Her daughter Anna, back home from the summer, having completed the first year of doing a business degree, pointed out that unless you are certain about your price elasticity of demand for your cups of coffee, raising the price might be a poor decision. She'd be great to have around, wouldn't she? She'd be brilliant to have around. You having your daughter comes back and starts spouting that at you. Linos does not have a clue what Anna was talking about and asked her to explain what she meant. Okay, so it says let's just have a look at what we could have the AO2 for here. It says, runs a coffee shop in this place. I think that's in Wales. It looks like it's in Wales. And business has been good. So we know that they're doing well. Okay. She's only had, and considering it's in this place, I can't imagine that they're going to be going up against people like Starbucks and things like this in this little Welsh village. And it says that they're looking to increase the price. So let's have a look at what we can do then. Okay. Oops. Okay, so business has been good in recent months. It is spring or summer. Is that something that we need to consider? Well, yes, it is. It is something that's going to affect your price elasticity, your income elasticity, and things like that. Your price elasticity will change depending on the seasonality of the product. Are people willing to spend a premium on ice cream on the beach in a hot day? Yes, they are. Are they willing to do it in the middle of winter? No, they're not. What about competition? Well, competition is likely to be low because it's in this place. It sounds like this little Welsh place. Like, it doesn't say it's a Welsh village, but it's not. I've not heard of that place unless it's a really well established. So if you're in a situation like that in an exam and they don't make it blatantly obvious to you, then as long as you use assumptions and tell them that you're assuming that this place is not going to be, it's not like London or anything like that, then that's reasonable. That's okay. Substitute goods for caffeine. Is there any loads of other ones? Is it going to be quite elastic? Well, it depends, doesn't it? If there isn't many substitutes, I mean, there are substitutes for caffeine. You could have you could go and get an energy drink and stuff like that. But coffee in this regard might be substitute goods would have to be other coffee shops and things like that, wouldn't it? Because we'd have to say, well, is it like for like available? Well, hopefully in this little place, then no. Is it addictive? Well, yes, caffeine is addictive, so there would be an element of that comes into it. And is this place a holiday destination? I don't know. Should I know that? I'm sorry if I'm coming across as a Luddite here. Is this a really well known place? So yeah, I would say no. I would say is it a holiday destination potentially. I don't know. But you'll be in an exam situation like that as well, and have to make a reasonable assumption about what's going on. Okay, good analysis of our PED can go, for a good impacts upon sales when price is raised. So basically showing them on how does it impact on it. That's what you need to be explaining to us. So you've not only explained what PE does, but you need to explain what it does in comparison to things like this. And then finally, for your AO4, a balanced evaluation of how the change in price may have either a positive or negative effect. So what I've done is I've got an answer for you here. We've been through each one. This is the layout I'd use. So start off with your AO1 right at the start. Just explain to me what price elasticity demand is. For your P2, you can use AO2, AO3, AO4. Why rising price might be a bad mood or a good mood. It doesn't matter which one you use. You can change these. And then for your second paragraph, you can use why it might be a good move. And then finally for your P4 is going to be your conclusion and your final answer in your question. Remember, when you're answering an evaluation question, you really shouldn't be answering the question until the P4, until the last paragraph. That's why conclusions are not just summations. They're not summaries of what you've talked about. Lots of people struggle with summaries because they go into this GCSE mode of just repeating themselves. That's not a conclusion. A conclusion to the end of a book wouldn't be that they just repeat everything that they've just said. It's like going, oh yeah, what happens at the end of Avengers? Captain America's good, isn't he? Well, let's talk about Captain America for a little bit. Well, no, wait a minute. We've done Captain America. We need to talk about what happens at the end of the book or end of the movie. Yeah. Well, don't worry about that. Well, no, do worry about that because it's the conclusion. The reason we're watching the movie is to find out what happens. So that's exactly what you've got the problem as. It's lots of people don't do that in the summary. They don't come up with the ending they don't answer the question. So let's have a little look. So I've done a couple of paragraphs here. Let's have a look at them. So it says, when Lenos raises the price for coffee, she can anticipate that the quantity demanded will fall because the prices are raised, less people can afford or will be willing to purchase a good. Yeah? Are we happy with that? PED measures the change in quantity demanded after a change in price. If PED for Lenos' coffee is elastic, then the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price that caused it. If PED for Lenos' coffee is inelastic, then the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than the percentage change in price which caused it. Okay? Really, really simple. Just make it clear to me. Now, paragraph 2. Raising the price may be a bad move for is it Lindos or Linos? I don't know. Because customers, we call him Jeff, because customers may go to cheaper competition. If there are many other local coffee shops, then the coffee would be price elastic because they're raising the price a little, customers would go elsewhere and there would be a large decrease in sales. This could lead to a lower revenue than she had previously, therefore a poor decision. Just to raise your attention to the sort of AO3 chain and the fact that we've put this could lead to a lower revenue than she'd have previously, so we've actually made a bad decision here. Is a nice little bit of AO4 just little put on there. However, this depends on how much competition there is and if they're offering a very similar product. If there are not any coffee shops in the area, then raising the price may not lead to a decrease in customers for them. So if it's a very inelastic, it could be a very inelastic product potentially, couldn't it? But we don't know. They've not given us that information, so we're just discussing it. We're just saying, well, look, if there isn't many, then it'll be more inelastic, so therefore she'll be able to, benefit from that. On the other hand, raising the price might be a good decision if, as we know, the business has been good. Therefore, she has a loyal base of customers and she might be willing to purchase the coffee from them at a higher price, and therefore the coffee would be price inelastic. Even by raising the prices, sales wouldn't drop much, so our overall revenue could be higher. This would depend on how loyal those customers are and whether the business has been good due to the fact it's nearly summer and a tourist destination rather than solely because customers prefer her coffee to anywhere else. It would depend on the situation, wouldn't it? And that's what you as a business analyst, that's what you as a good business student should be telling me. Always look at the situation, always be telling me whether you think it's a good idea or not and why. Okay. Finally, overall, by increasing the price, demand for the coffee will likely decrease. In terms of whether raising the price is a poor decision or not, it depends on whether the coffee is inelastic or elastic. If the coffee is inelastic, then it will lead to a higher revenue for them in the short term and more finance to reinvest in the business for the long term, and making Anna's comment justified. However, if it's elastic, revenue will fall in the short term and the business may have to create a new strategy to increase revenue for the long term, justifying Anna's comment that would be a poor decision to raise the price. Remember, Anna simply said that you need to look into it before you do it. But basically, can you see the conclusion there? That is a well thought out answer. That's actually answering the question. We're not just saying, oh, well, let's just recap everything we've just said. Okay, really, really important one there. And we've got a nice little thing, and we're pretty much spot on for an hour in terms of that. So that leaves us just with today's news to have a little look at. So if you are with me, let's have a look at the news. Let's have a look. I usually just press refresh when I do this, just to have a look at what the most thing is. Let's have a look. Is there anything really obvious? Usually I'll have a look at this, but if there's not, everything's just about coronavirus at the minute. Oh, let's have a look at this one. It says, oil price still below zero as turmoil persists. Negative oil prices on Monday were a quirk, says one market expert. This is interesting, isn't it? The price of US oil, which slumped to minus $37 at one point, was produced by a trading deadline and is now back to close to a positive figure. The UK oil price has also been hit too, but the price of a barrel of Brent crude is now about $23. Yesterday's price action is the best understood as a quirk or particularity of futures trading. So he reckons that unprecedented price movement confirms that the near-term demand is very weak, but it isn't cataclysmic, he said. We don't see negative oil prices as a new normal. Oil prices have been weakened sharply because of the combination of oversupply and collapse of global demand. So the price of oil reported is actually the future price of oil. And basically they were just saying that you'd have to pay. Essentially what that came out as is, because of this crazy situation, you'd have to pay people to take the oil because there is literally no demand with satisfied demand. So in this case, let's have a look at price elasticity for this one then. Usually price elasticity for oil products is quite inelastic because it's something that we need. It's a necessity. It is, we need it to be able to produce things. We need it as a fuel. We need it as lots of things. But in this case, at this moment in time, it's actually very elastic. Why is that? Because people aren't buying things. People aren't needing this. Businesses aren't needing to produce, so they're not needing to buy fuel. They're not needing to purchase things to be able to, make things. People aren't going out as much, so they're not needing to go and buy petrol and diesel. That's why the price of petrol and diesel has fallen so massively, because it's a response to this. They're trying to put the price down to try and stimulate growth in that market, but they're not. I'm not going out buying things because I'm not going out and to do it. So at this moment in time, if we look at price elasticity, what would have been quite an inelastic product usually, not massively, but definitely, a necessity, something that we can't go without, is actually becoming quite elastic at this moment in time because of this current situation. So let's have a look at another one. It says here, UK employment rate at a record high before lockdown. Alcohol fuels rise in assaults in over 50s. What? We have a look at this one. Alcohol fuels rise in assaults on over 50s. The number of people in their 50s and 60s needing emergency hospital treatment after being assaulted is the highest level in 9 years. Nearly 21,000 people over 51 went to A&E in England and Wales in 2019 for violence-related injuries. It comes in overall violence-related casualty admissions fell by 6% at the steepest decline since 2015. All figures are based on the annual survey. Last year, it's estimated that 175,764 people attended the emergency facilities. Injuries sustained in violence. How strange. This is what we're talking about, though. Price elasticity, again, if we're to relate it to what we're talking about. Addiction. People can't control themselves, can they? They can't be trusted for stuff like this, and this is what's worrying about things like that. It's not like, that. And why are they talking about alcohol? Current cohorts of older people exhibited higher alcohol consumption levels in the past and maybe continuing their relatively higher levels into higher. There's an interesting one, isn't it? So what they're saying, heavy binge drinking and violence associated with it were much more frequent 3 or 4 decades ago, but it seems possible that the generational trait is also reflected in slowly increasing in the risk of injury. So what they're saying is, if you take it as the current younger people are binge drinking a lot, then the likelihood is when they're older, they might get into scraps a lot more, and that's what seems to be doing. UK employment record high. We've talked about this, haven't we? That's not true. Record employment rate at record high. Yeah, well, if you put everybody in education till they're 18, if you force them into it, then you can get them off the unemployment records. I wonder why they did that. That's exactly why they did that. So that isn't true. Technically speaking, you can make it look like that, but that's not realistic. This is an interesting one. Primark goes from 650 million sales a month to nothing. Clothing giant Primark has gone from making 650 mils in a sale a month to nothing as coronavirus has forced it to close in Europe and the US. Primark owner Associated British Foods has been squarely in the path of the pandemic. Without furlough support from European states, many of Primark's 68,000 staff would have been made redundant. The company has also written down the value of its clothing stock by 284 million in a statement. They said that from making sales of 650 million each month since the last of our stores closed on the 22nd of March, we have sold nothing. He added that while we would love to be able to reopen Primark stores, I know that we must not do so until we've suppressed the disease. This is reality. This is what's happening to people. It is affecting businesses. We can rebuild the profits. We can't replace the people we lose. It's interesting, and whether they actually believe that or not, because the way the government are talking at the minute, I think that the people are getting bored. Did you remember the chief medical officer said when this was started? He said that you've got to be careful about lockdown because people get bored of it. I totally agree. I think people are getting bored of it. People are doing absolutely ridiculous things now. People are going out for picnics. People are like going out and bike rides. You've got people, and you know what I've talked about, you've got loads of really, really fat people running around the streets. And it's not because they're trying to lose weight, because those people, you can see the fact that they're not usually exercising. So people are taking it upon themselves to actually try and go out more than usual, which is insane. I think that people have taken the, you know, when Boris Johnson said, you know, have an hour's exercise every day, it wasn't an order. It wasn't, you know, if you do that normally, then you should you should have to go out and do it. That isn't what they were saying. I think people have misunderstood that. So it's a worrying one. Let's just do one more, okay, before we shoot. Wow. Demand for renters slumps amid lockdown. Restaurant bosses call for rent holiday. So look at this one. It says high street demand bosses have asked for a chancellor for a 9-month rent holiday to think. Without it, some 2 million hospitality jobs are at risk, warned Jonathan Downey. He has persuaded bosses at a chain such as Burger King, Oaxaca, and Nando's to back his plea. The idea is fairly simple: it won't cost the taxpayer a thing, and it won't. No one in the industry expects to get back everything. With some extraordinary next measures, we estimate that more than half of hospitality businesses and many of 2 million jobs will not survive. Under the idea called National Timeout, over the next 9 months, rent would be pushed back so that restaurants could pay nothing. Leases are extended by 9 months. Right, how does that work? Landlords would be helped too under the plan with the same pushback for the next month. Right. This is interesting, isn't it? This is like extreme cash flow management. Right, what they're saying is, let's just put everything back 9 months. Okay, let's just push rent back 9 months. Let's just put loan mortgage payments back 9 months. There has to be a failure somewhere. That money's not being paid to banks. The banks can't be able to pay it to other people. Their suppliers, their stakeholders don't get money. It's not a solution. You know, like essentially, like yes, you could do this. But it's just pushing it back again. It's just pushing it back a little bit further. It doesn't mean it's a solution. The way they're talking about it is a solution, but it isn't, is it? It's just something that isn't. It says, it is now clear that hospitality businesses, having been the first and hit hardest by the virus, will now be the last to allowed to reopen. Well, yeah, it is. It's a difficult one. But yeah, so it says here. So it says some major landlords like Canary Wharf Group have also confirmed that they support the plan. However, Melanie Leach, who runs Landlords Group and the British Property Federation, said that missing out on 9 months' rent would be a significant loss for the industry that has a rent bill of 2.5 billion each quarter. It's a solution that would allow businesses to work through the next 9 months towards a bounce back without the need for another government handout. We have to find a way to make this work for everyone, and although this is early stages, it feels like an answer. It says the government said we've taken the action on unprecedented speeds to support businesses, jobs and economy through the challenging times. This includes targeted support for the hospitality sector with businesses rates, holidays and cash grants of up to 25 grand. Pubs and restaurants can also benefit from other things. So basically they're saying that they're not they're not saying that they're going to do it at this moment in time, are they? Thank you very much for joining me. Again, you are saints and martyrs to this cause. Thank you very much for continuing, and I hope it has been useful to you. I hope it's a nice little bit of revision. Remember, there is lots more stuff online that you can find out. Go to mrbusinessman.co.uk. It will link you back to the channel. Subscribe, share this with people if you know that they need a little bit of help with the business stuff. Remember, it's not just for people who are in my class, but you are very welcome. Anybody who's watching. Okay, I will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. And I will I might wear a funny hat tomorrow. Might wear a funny hat. Peace.